Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to my suggested balance changes. Just a quick update with where we are in the series before we get into this. We have 80 neutral cards remaining, so we are exactly halfway through. We've also covered 6 brand new cards that I really think Jagex need to put into the game, and we've also covered the ones that I have put face down, so that is Ariane and Raptor. So just 4 classes remaining: Linza, Morvaran, Ozan, and Venescula. So let's continue. We have King Black Dragon, often abbreviated to KBD. Draw 2 cards, and I think that's what this needed, just a bit more of a reason to be killed in the early game, or sort of the mid-early game. It's always compared to Commander Ziliana really unfavorably, so I think it's never been picked for that reason. I mean, yes, it gives you 4 more gold, but it also has like 1 extra attack and doesn't have a 12 life reward, which is the big thing, right? Ziliana is just a much safer card to kill, and it's a card that doesn't really require any specific setup to kill either, because once you've got 5 base attack, you can just play Commander Ziliana, and that's a fine turn, because, you know, it's a net loss of 2 life, whereas this would be a net loss of 16 life, and that's no good for a 4 extra gold reward. But, alright, maybe I'm missing the point. This is a dragon. We can kill it with anti-fire potion. And that does, admittedly, give it a lot more use in the early game if you have a really great, dedicated way to kill it early on. Getting that 11 gold then becomes really valuable, as it helps you ramp up into Amulet of Fury and Nastroth, and maybe some other cards, like these. Just saying. But the comparison is still quite unfavorable, because now, okay, anti-fire potion in slot 1, King Black Dragon in slot 2, so you now have to divide this 11 gold reward over 2 slots. And it's actually a 10 gold reward because anti-fire potion costs 1. So that's 5 gold per slot, which is not very good. Now, you could add more gold to the card to make it better. That's certainly a route you could go down, but I prefer cards because a lot of the time you'll put this in your deck and, you know, you look at your deck stats and you have a lot of gold in your deck, but it's all locked up in like 2 or 3 cards, which makes it like very difficult to curve out because you're not really curving. You have to kill this big creature before you can like spend your gold on anything. And a lot of the time to kill this, you'd need something like a D-Long, which costs gold. So there's this kind of catch-22 going on. But that's not to say that it's unkillable early on. Certainly you can, but there's just not much of a reason to. So I wanted to add more of a reason to. Because if you want to generate a lot of gold, those decks often tend to slow down early on to, you know, generate that gold. They find it hard to find the deck slots for something like Krasian Warrior, and if you're, you know, generating gold, you're not going to have as many ways to get your base attack up quickly to kill a Krasian Warrior with, like, you know, creature AP decks do. So this could even be 3 cards, maybe 4? The point is, I think the deck this goes into not only needs the gold, but also a bit more setup for the late game. And if you're getting all of this gold, if you then can't spend it on the next chapter, ooh, that's painful. If you have any empty slots, that's going to be really bad for you. Let's think of a game like Hearthstone and Magic, where the resource system is that you have mana, and if you ever have a turn where you have like 4 or 5 mana available and you don't spend it, you don't want to float that mana. That's horrible. You're going to get behind. And floating slots in Chronicle is basically the same thing. So I think it's important that, you know, if you're getting all of this gold, you're going to have to draw some cards to find some options to actually spend it on. And also, I just like the theme of, like, you need more loot. Lots of gold, big old dragons guarding some gold, makes sense. Also, he's guarding some cards. Cards are loot. And the more I talk about it, the more I'd like it to be draw 4 cards, the same as Burnt Meat, which would effectively be like increasing the gold reward by 3. So if that was ever somebody's intention, then Burnt Meat is equally as good. I don't know, the point I'm highlighting is that I don't think it would be that OP. Moving on though to Ketzek, which is quite a strong card, which is interesting because it only does 3 more damage than Haunted Soul, and Haunted Soul is considered not that good. So I think that highlights how valuable the efficiency you can get out of slots is. I guess this does come with a 2 armor reward as well, so it's a bit like a 10 life swing, whereas Haunted Soul's a 5 life swing. So I guess this is kind of twice as good. Does it need a 2 armor reward? You could also write Exhaust on it, like a lot of other damage cards. But that seems like more of a demon thing. Personally, I just wouldn't change it. It's okay to have good cards, but I did want to point out that this is on the higher end of the power curve. This, however, is not. Back in closed beta, before you could buy packs and crafting materials were incredibly valuable. They weren't nearly as given out for free as they are now. Crazy Helm made a deck. I showed it in an earlier video, actually. The one where you kill Krill, and then you double strike with Tokash and just OTK them on chapter 1. I built that deck and climbed up to ranks real fast, got to the top of ladder, and then went straight to Reddit and posted a deck containing Keris on there, saying, "This is the deck I used to get rank 1, and of course it wasn't. Keris certainly was not in that deck. I think he just set out to build the worst deck possible with, and it involved Keris, which is probably why they changed it from being an Emerald to being a class, well, a card everyone gets. The point is, this is a very underwhelming card, and I would quite happily change it to remove 3 health from all Calphites in your hand, deck, and keep this effect as well. I got lost somewhere on the way. I did originally think this should still be written on the card as well, but 3 from everything. Just every Calphite you ever encounter forever will have 3 less health. I'm not sure what Keris is in RuneScape, but Silverlight, which I spoke about in a previous video, is a legendary weapon that's really good against demons. I assume Keris is basically the same thing, but for Calphites. And it would make sense. Once you pick up your legendary weapon, your character's going to be really good against Calphites for the rest of the game. The Silverlight I suggested basically does a similar thing to this. And I made the argument that the most optimized demon decks probably wouldn't run Silverlight. I think it's more of a card for new players to experiment and then realize, oh, actually I don't need this. And I think Keris would be very much the same thing. There'll be a link below to the video playlist if you want to catch up with those. The only thing I will say is that you probably don't need this 1/3 weapon if it has this effect. I just don't see this being OP, especially when it costs 3 gold. Like, the only deck that I would even be interested in is Calphite Morvaran, and he doesn't have that much gold going, so it's not going to be something that's super consistent either. I'm pretty sure he'd rather buy a stamina potion. Cake Meek's a fine card. Oh, imagine how game-breaking this would be if you could remove 3 health from it. Otherwise, a fine card. I'm really glad they made this a neutral one that you get for free. I just think it's a nice early game card. It gives you a bit of gold to get you going for those decks where you want to buy stuff, because new players will always be wanting to buy stuff because they don't know any better. And that 1/1 weapon's nice because you can use that to kill a 3 health creature like Troll Chucker or Skeleton Warrior, which new players have a lot of in their collection. Also, it's got some really interesting synergies with Alchemy, Work Order, that kind of thing. It's just a really nice card. Calphite Soldier would also be obviously totally busted if you could remove 3 health from it in your hand and deck. But I changed it from the 3 gold to something totally different. I think now the tribal synergy is like more clearly defined, and back when this card was originally made like this, it wasn't quite as clearly defined. Like, a Calphite deck was just a twinkle in Morvaran's single eye, and he didn't exist because it was the very beginning of the game. So I changed it to just have a more tribal synergy effect, because I think that's, like, befitting of a Calphite. But also, I just feel like this card's role is filled by Skeleton Warrior and also Ali Morrisane. So I wanted to, you know, just give it its own unique, flavorful role. And this won't be as good in the early game as this card, because even in a dedicated Calphite deck, right, you're only going to have so many Calphites in it, as well as a whole bunch of other cards. And you're always going to play 4 cards a chapter, so you'll never have that many cards in hand. So this requires, like, setup with card draw, or setup with something that gives you Calphites. The Queen gives you Calphites, and that's really interesting, because now you have to make the decision of, do I want to kill the Soldier first and get an extra Guardian in my hand, or do I want to kill the Queen first to get, you know, a whole bunch of Guardians in my hand for the gold effect to trigger? Also, Calphite Egg Chamber would work with this. Next up we have Calphite Emissary. A fine card, actually quite a powerful card, but often neglected from a lot of decks, and I think that's because the biggest role people play this for is the weapon durability, and when weapon durability destruction is most effective is Chapter 1, when you want to hit their TD weapon or their Sergeant Slimetoes weapon. But in that early game, you're going to take 4 damage from it if you're 2-hit killing it, so that's no good, and I think that's why people don't like it quite as much. But remove 5 armor and a gold reward, actually a very powerful card. Also would be incredibly busted if you could remove 3 health from it in your hand and deck. 2 Calphites just isn't enough. No one wants to spend 2 gold for random cards, especially when you can pay an extra gold for burnt meat and get, you know, 4 cards that you actually put in your deck. So similar to the Adventurous that I spoke about in a previous video, increased the cost and made it give you more. I think random cards, if you're getting random cards, you're going to want a big selection of them so you actually find a couple that are useful. But also I think this would be really nice for Calphite Morvaran. A lot of his cards say spend some Calphites from your hand. Also that Calphite Soldier I mentioned. And maybe this even takes up a role where Calphite Morvaran can cut a bunch of the Calphites from his deck and run this instead. I don't know. The point is this isn't good enough, and that's why it's almost never played. And this is much better. You could make the argument as well, okay, this is a location, maybe this is a bit too good, but the Adventurous is a ship, and that has synergy with 50 ships, so I don't think that's a great argument either. Moving on to Jubblybird, a fine card. Not the most slot-efficient card, but that's okay for its stats. But by no means awful. Always reasonable. Yoga Shaman, a fine card. Jad. On the high end of the power curve, that 4 armor reward is absolutely enormous given how accessible this is. I think once Fern is buffed, this will become a bit worse. Currently a very good card though. Ice Troll. No changes. I just didn't even know where to start. People were messaging me saying, you've forgotten to fix Ice Troll. But what do you even change it to? I think what this card was originally envisioned being is a tool to get a massive weapon, well, a small weapon with a lot of durability, and then you can start building that durability for the Linza deck that uses Hurl Weapon. So you grab this 2/6, start Dragon Forging it, you know, that deck. And who am I to change the vision of the game? I just don't even know. Hobgoblin. A fine card, has always been on the edge of playability. You get 1 less gold compared to Skeleton Warrior, but you do get this remove 5 armor effect. I think it's always just been trumped slightly by some other card, but it's always been on the realms of playability. I mentioned in the Raptor video, it'd be really cool to see a card that gives your opponent armor and removes life. So like, it's not really a change in stats for them, but maybe you could, you know, combo that kind of card with Hobgoblin. I thought that was really interesting, but a fine card. Grotworm. So this particular Grotworm I think would be very, very strong and OP with the new Cerberus that has been released into the game. I really like that new Cerberus. It's not like ridiculous early on because, you know, removing 3 health from something isn't going to help you reach into Jad, whereas something like Toxil, which removes 4, like, will help you. Cerberus, though, becomes really strong in the mid-game because you can combo it with, like, the other Cerberus or Toxil or Watchtower Guard, whatever it is. And then suddenly, like, all the stuff with massive amounts of HP, like Commander Zilliana, Tenebra, Undead Dragon, get a lot better. And especially Grotworm would get better as well, especially if it gave you a 5 armor award. Because then we're getting into the realms of a card that gives you 7 gold and 5 armor in a single slot. That was never the intention. The idea was just to make it less punishing to kill, and I did that by giving it an armor award. You could reduce the stats, you could make the health less, you could make the attack less. Whatever it is. The idea was to make it less punishing, but obviously with Cerberus, this would, that would not be the desired effect. So I think, well, with that in mind now, because when I made this change, Cerberus didn't exist in the way that it does now. What I would do is reduce its health to 8, and then it becomes a bit more like Dagannoth Sentinel in the sense that sometimes people want to 3-hit kill that. They'll kill their KGP agent or Kaizaj or whatever it is, go up to 3 base, and then 3-hit kill the Sentinel. They take a lot of damage, but sometimes it's the only thing you can do. And I think if you made this 8 health, then you could do that. But also, when you get 4 base attack, you can 2-hit kill this. The point is, it's just less punishing, right? But I think a 5 armor reward is not the way to go about that. Moving on, though, to Grizzly Bear. Just a bit underwhelming. Just doesn't do very much. So I increased the rewards by 1 on both. And now this is a bit like Sergeant Slimetoes, or the new Sergeant Slimetoes, except you only get 1 durability, and you get 2 gold. Here we do have Greater Demon. People always like to point out the synergy with Relisum's Balm, that 2 gold and the fact that you get exhausted is really valuable there. I tried running this card in Darkstrike Ariane. I had White Wolf for 2 gold, and this gave you the other 2 gold, and then you could buy Relisums. And that worked some of the time, but like it just wasn't consistent enough. Like 2-card combos often are a bit inconsistent. So whilst gold and damage on the same card can be a bit concerning, I think it's okay for Greater Demon. I guess that's the point I'm trying to illustrate. Granite Maul. I haven't changed the cost or the effect of any of the weapons that sort of cost gold, at least the expensive ones. And that's because I think given all of the other improvements just across the board to gold, these will be fine. And we know they're good cards already because Dungeoneering, they've always been high picks. Maybe not so much Granite Mill, but certainly Garayo Hordestalker, the 5/2 weapon there. D-Long. I know Solomon isn't quite as large of a weapon, but that's always been a highly valued pick as well. So I think these cards are mostly fine and should be left untouched. Golden Hammer is not one of those cards, though. I feel like if you're paying 2 gold for this weapon, you should get a bit of extra value. Especially when you think, oh, I could kill Barbarian Warrior and then get, you know, a 2/3 weapon, and you even get a gold on top of it. You get paid for the weapon. And Watchtower Guard gives 3 armor as well. And I know that those cards will deal damage to you if you can't kill them in 1 hit, but that's alright. I'm happy to take that damage if that means I can play them in Chapter 1, Slot 1, because sometimes you have to, you don't have any other choice. But with, you know, Golden Hammer and just cards that cost gold, generally, you can't do that. You can't go into negative gold and pay for it later. Well, that would be an interesting mechanic. Anyway, I wanted to add a bit more value to it. I feel like creature cards are these very flexible, very worthwhile, that, you know, kind of give you a meaningful effect. And gold cards, because you have to slow down and get some gold, they should come with another effect. So a lot of the cards that are a bit underwhelming that cost gold, I've added draw a card to. And I think that's a nice theme for them. As I mentioned, creature cards, flexible, impactful. Cards that cost gold should be giving you more options. They should replace themselves and, you know, sort of generate more resources, if you kind of think card draw is a resource, which it sort of is. At any rate, this golden hammer is just not very good, and this one is marginally better. Certainly you're not going to feel as frustrated by this card if you're playing a draft format. Next up, though, Goblin Trickster. A fine card, especially in those drafting formats. As it turns out, equipment, generally speaking, is pretty good. Amulet, Fury, even D-Long. Garaya Hordestalkers are familiar, so that doesn't count, but those cards often are win conditions or are very useful for reach. This is not seen as much constructed play, but back when Full Tetsu was really good, it was seeing, you know, play in some aggro decks. Goblin Flash Mob. So the change to this is partly to slow down Weapon Linzer, because I think it's quite obvious I really don't like the Weapon Linzer deck. I think it's very cheesy, so I might be a bit biased here, so I'd take my change with a grain of salt, but very similar to the Calphite Soldier. Now that Morvaran exists and that tribal decks are actually a thing, I felt like cards, you know, that are in that tribe should have an effect that's relevant to the tribe. That's how Murlocs work in Hearthstone, right? What's the point in a card that's in a tribe that doesn't do anything or synergize with the rest of the things in the tribe? It just seems like, I don't know. Glutton's Behemoth. No change. A fine card. Sometimes rubs me the wrong way, but I said exactly the same thing about Bilrek. Giant Spider. Impactful 3/1 weapon. Doesn't cost any gold. That's what creature cards do. Fine card. Giant Rat. It's obviously not the best weapon destruction, but that's alright. Calphite Emissary is obviously bigger stats, bigger effect. It's reasonable. It's pretty good in dungeoneering and drafting. It's always good to pick up some kind of weapon destruction. I always look for at least one, ideally 2 cards that destroy weapons, because, you know, you might want one just to play randomly during the game when you see, you know, maybe there is an opportunity where they have a weapon and you're able to destroy it. But you'll also want a second one for the final fight. And Giant Rat's always been like a solid pick over a lot of the other trash that exists in the game, so fine card. Ghost Ship. I was surprised to see the community lobby for this to stay at 3, because I agreed with the original Jagex suggestion, which was that it should be reduced by 1, and then they never went ahead with it because the community said no. And makes sense why. I mean, at the time, Scarface Pete was very prevalent. It was frustrating a lot of people. Who wants to see discard get even better? No one. But reducing the cost of Ghost Ship, like, I don't know why people magically thought that would fix Scarface Pete. It's like, oh, Ghost Ship's getting cheaper, let's make it stay 3, and that means Scarface Pete will be less busted. That's not how that works. At the end of the day, though, spending 3 to discard 2 cards is not that good. General Warpface. This is what I expect from goblins. And maybe this is better designed than my goblin and my Calphite, because even if you don't have any in hand, you still get like a 3 armor reward. So if you're dished out 30 random cards and this is one of them, it's still got some value. And I know random 30 cards is not a format, but it can be. Perhaps in future Chronicle they will add a format like that. It would be really, really cool to do that. But you'd need all of the cards to be good, right? Or at least reasonable. Another format is you get, you know, 60 random cards and you build a deck of 30 out of them. That's called Sealed. Geeker. So I know this one costs 0, but it's still a similar argument to earlier. Before we talk about this, I just want to pull another card out of the pile. Here, Corpse Archer, which we made an interesting change to, I think. I'll put these up here. But aggressive, deal 2 damage to rival, and you get a 1/3 weapon. When they added Corpse Archer to the game, it just didn't compare at all favorably to Goblin Raider, the Linzer card that gives you the same weapon, but also some armor as well. And, you know, the Linzer card, yeah, it's a class card. I suppose class cards have a license to be slightly better than neutrals, but not only was it better, this is worse in the sense that the stat line is worse as well. Like a 2/2 you can just kill. A 1/3 you're going to take damage from. So I wanted to give it, like, a different role. You can still run it in Linzer. I mean, the most highly optimized Linzers won't, because Rolo the Stout is really good, and maybe they'd run this Geeker instead if they even were considering the Corpse Archer. But undead cards seem to have a theme of doing damage, or at least that would make sense for undead, right? And this guy's got a bow and arrow. He should be able to hit you before you hit him. And then do 2 damage to rival, bit of damage, and then you pick up his bow and arrow and get a 1/3 weapon. Similar to my discussion on Red Chin Chomper, I thought, those 3 base attack aggro decks needed a bit more sort of support. Sometimes you don't always find that KGP agent in your opening hand, and Kaizaj Tournament's obviously a diamond that not everyone can have. So I thought this could be some support for just helping you get your base attack up high enough to kill Troll Chuckers and Skeleton Warriors and stuff like that. Just alleviate some of that difficulty for those decks by giving them sort of another aggro tool. Creature cards have an impactful effect, very flexible. Support cards should support you with your hand size. Replace themselves, generate resources, that kind of thing. Because, I know this card is one that you get for free as soon as you start the game, but it is so bad. I just had a sudden thought whilst recording this. What if all support cards just drew you a card? And that was like a mechanic in the game. Like creature cards, you have to kill them, you get the effect, blah, blah, blah. But all support cards just across the board just said draw a card. Or not even said, they just did. That was just like something... Anyway, that was an idea I just had randomly. I'm not suggesting that Jagex now go and implement that, not one bit, but it was just a nice thing to think about. What would the game be if it had been built in that way? At any rate, I think a lot of support cards could just have draw a card on them, but yeah, a nice piece of food for thought. I think we'll leave it there though. We got through 27 cards this video. And if I do that for the next 2 videos, we will finish in 2 more videos, and then we'll have finished the neutrals. Thank you very much for watching. Do leave a like if you enjoyed listening to this or thought it was interesting in any way, and I will see you all again next time.